Hello everyone, welcome again, and this is the 18th video on Java Web Application Development tutorial. Let's run our existing source code, and in this tutorial we're going to continue to like user list is done. We have directly get the data from the database, and now we are going to work to update the data. First, I'm going to move to code 1 codec, going to Java Web tutorial. And we have done with this how to get data in a user list, and now we are going to work on to edit the data. How can we perform the edit operation to edit any data? So the very first we need from the front end side, let's make some changes in the front end side, then we'll move to the back end side. So at the very first option at the front end side, it means where we are getting the user list, we need to add an edit button here in this place. So let's add an edit button there, and then we'll continue. So step 1 is there. Step 1, perform edit operation using JSP servlet. So to add an edit button in your list, so this complete article, this complete tutorial series, this complete course, whatever the article you are getting here, it's designed step by step. So if you're going to follow this from the initial level, it will work similarly. So I'm gonna just my src web, and let's check the page. So the user view list page, here we are going to show here we are showing complete data in the list. So I'm gonna add one more table data tag here, one more table data, which is called edit. Okay, so now if I'm gonna refresh this, you can see the edit button is there, and we can name it as a action as a heading. So another th, which is called action. You can see, under this section we have edit. Yeah. So now when we click on the edit, it should redirect on the edit page and work now. So now the next step we have is going to in the registration control or the sign up control, sign up page control, and going to pass some data in the doGet method. So here I pass one ID. They already see already we have an user object. That's user object getting data from the user, like user get ID, first name, last name. So we need to edit a specific data, like we need to edit this user data, only this record or this record. So we need a unique ID to identify the user. So as you can see, we have already this user ID as a unique, which is returning here this user.get ID. So we are going to redirect user to our registration control. In our case, in this project case that we are working, our controller page is user controller, I guess, user controller, yes. So we are going to redirect user to this page, user controller, and let's redirect user. So it will be, so add some scriptlet tag, and or directly we can pass the user CTL. So it's going to redirect to user CTL, and the ID will be user ID. The whatever the ID come from the data when user, like if user going to click on this edit operation, this ID will goes with a query, and if user going to click on this button, then this ID will go there. So that's it. Now the controller will goes to the user controller, and user controller, it will go by default on the do get method. So we need to make some changes in the do get method now. So let's copy. I'm going to copy this code to save the time, and then we'll explain the code to you. Right. This much code only. Okay, so at the top I'm gonna paste this code. So user model. So this time what we need to do, we need to perform edit operation. So you can see I have created an object of user model, which is our database transactions package model. Here we need to add a method which will be our update method. So it's not implemented yet, it will be implemented in a while. And now we are going to get the id request.get parameter. So this id will come from this link. So you can see a parameter as a id. So when I pass the parameter, this parameter here, and it will return the id. So the id will be stored in the long in this variable. So this id will be come from the front end or view part. So now I put a condition here. If id is greater than 0, then user bean equals to null, like the whatever the object we have at the user bean should be null, and then bean equals to find the find by pk. So what is the find by pk here? So if you see at the top, we have method. We have to create a method find by pk. It means we need to find that user at the very first, then we'll set the attribute to the b. Okay, let's create one method there in the model, which will be our find by pk, and then we'll work on it. So here we have this method, which will be our find by pk. So I'm gonna create this method in the user model. Exactly, we need to find the data, find that particular user, that particular record that we are going to edit. So let's create. So this method will take a id, and we'll again create a database connection and fire a query select asterisk from user table where id equals to question mark. So we're gonna set a long id on this question mark. So this is the exactly id that we are going to pass in this string. So select asterisk from the user where id equals to this. So if user gonna click, if uh, if user gonna click on this button, then if a user gonna click on this button, then this id will be passed in the query, and the complete data will be returned. And if user gonna click this button, this id will be goes there, and this complete data will be come there. Okay, so let's see now. So as I execute the query, in the result set we are getting the user object. We create an user bean object and set the whatever the data coming from the database will set here. So if I talk about the database in Java web table, user table, we have first name, last name, login, password, dob, and mobile. So I'm gonna change this. First name, last name is okay. Then we have login, okay. Then we have password, okay. Then we have dob and mobile, perfect. So we have everything there, and it's going to return an object. So now just move to the user controller. Now this bean has the data. So whatever the requests come from the front end to add it, will pass the id into find by key, and it will return the data to this bean, and we send the data to the with a request attribute. So if id is not equal to 0 or is greater than 0, then it will set a request to 0, this. Now this data will goes to registration view page, and already we have the bean there. Now we have to get that bean so we can show the data when user going to edit it. Let's do it now. So I'm gonna move with the top. Then so we need to add one line code there, which will be a very user bean, and I'm gonna put it the messages. So we are going to put like this on the user view page. Let's edit here. In the user view page, in our case, our user view page is a registration page. For example, if you want to log out, click on the registration. So right now it's not working because of this error. So when user click on the edit button, the record will come this page and it will display like this. Then user will edit it and submit it for the update. So the very first step, we are going trying to show the data like this. So I put the request. So whatever the request will come from the user control, it will redirect to user view, and then user view will this user view will get the data. Let me pass the class name here. So in our case, the project name is this is our package name, and the class name is dot user bin. Then so now we have the complete data in this bean object, and we are getting the request as a scope as a request. Now we need to show the data at the front end. Let me show now how it's working. Let's run it. Still the data will not display there in the form, but when we set the data once, the data should be displayed there. So as I click on the login, okay, click on the user list, okay, and click on the edit. You can see it's redirecting on the user page to edit, but the complete data is not displayed here. So now this bean will help us to display the data. So just open this bean ID and find the every input field. So like we have that input field for the first name, so I'm gonna place in this place according to in this value place I'm gonna enter some data. So it should be percentage equals to bean dot get first name, and from where we are setting this data, we set this data here in the user control already and set it to it, and in the user view we are getting the data. So now this data will come in the first 10, and now if I'm gonna edit this, you can see that Remo is there. Now user can edit it. Let's refresh it, and now if you want to edit and change it, then we'll update it. Okay, perfect. So first name is done. Similarly, we can add all the last name and mobile. So let's do it very fast. So bean dot get last name. Another I have is a login ID, so I'm going to percent equals to bean dot get. It's not the last name, it's login. password, we don't need to show the password, so user is not going to update the password. And so if you want to update the password, you can, so but other user is not able to, so just dov. So again, percent equals to bin dot get password, and in the mobile number also it's going to be update the mobile number, so bin dot get mobile number, and that's it. Now if I'm going to edit this, you can see the complete data will display here. Now you can see still we have the registration button, so we can put a check here. Like for example, whenever user going to register first time, the ID should be 0. But in the case of edit, the ID has some value. This bin.get ID has some value. So we can put a condition here in this button text. So we are going to create one more button here, which will be our value as a update, and let's put a condition there. If, so I need a script, let's take if bin dot get id is greater than 0, then this update button should display. So I'm gonna close this it here, close it here, else we create an else part, and under this else part will display the registration. So if that ID has some value, then only the update button will display, otherwise it will display registration page. So let's check it now. So you can see now only the update button is displayed. If I'm going to log out and click on the registration, now we have the registration button. But you can see when I click on the null value, it's showing null when it's going to be registered. So we'll fix it in the next video. It's not an issue. So right now our target is to performing the edit operation. So user, so now it's coming as an update, but if I'm gonna change something, it will not work now. Let's not say it's not inserted, but let's fix how can we do that now. So it's going to operation as a register, operation is a submit button or registration register operation. Now let's move to the user controller. And if you notice, this time when user click on this submit registration button, update button, the data will goes to the form request in the form request of form, and it will hit to the user controller and post method. So you can see here we have a post method. Okay, now we have to implement the updated code here. We already add the code here to add a user. Now we'll mix the updated code here. So at the very first we need a method to update the data. So I move to the user model. I'm going to create a method to update the records. So I'm gonna copy this class for now, this method for now. So I just copied it and I'm going to place it in my user model. So you can see the user model. It's in our case it's user bean, so I just change it to user bean, and it takes input as a user object, and so whatever the data is going to be updated. So we create a get connection here, and when pass user set first name equals to question mark, last name equals to question mark, login equals to question mark, password equals to question mark, DOB mobile number, where ID equals to question mark. So we are going to set all the value. So first name, user.get, last name, login ID, password, and the DOB and the get mobile number, and we are going to get ID as a last. So whatever the ID will come from the front end, the user going to, this method going to update the record of that particular ID. So at the finally we execute and update the query. Then it will, if record is successfully inserted, it will return one value in form of integer or long. So it will be same as we add the user. Now let's move the complete code. This will be a registration page is done, and the user model. So we have done these changes. Okay, that is a controller. So we are going to put a condition there. Let's move to the code. I will make the live changes there. So is if user going to update the record, the user bean should have the data. So I'm gonna set one more attribute here. So user dot set ID, and it will be request dot get parameter. The parameter will be ID. That it shows now. Set long again. Okay. So need to convert into long. So we are going to use a data utility class, data utility dot get long, and we'll pass the parameter here. So now we have that ID, and I think we'll need to store it in variable now. Yes. If user dot get ID is greater than 0, the same condition that we put into the in the above. So if you wanna see where is here. So if user.getID is greater than 0, then it will execute this code. So let's do it now. So now it will call, if ID is greater than 0, then it will call the update user method from the user model, and then set servlet utility set success message. User is update successfully in the request form, else it's not inserted. And if id is greater than less than 0, then it will execute to this part, which is going to aid the data, correct? And finally it's going to response the code to users, so it will become after else operation, correct? Correct. So if id is greater than 0, it's going to update the record. It's less than 0, it's going to register the record. Perfect. So now let's type once. If it is work, if it's there any error, we'll solve the error. So user list, I'm gonna edit this record. Apart from Remo, I'm gonna add some more O there. And I'm gonna click on update. Showing not updated means there is some error. Let me show what is the error. So it's executing the add user and the do post, but the ID should be greater than 0 this time. Yes, it is. Okay, let me print this ID to check the records, whatever the record will come in from the database and from the front end. So system dot out dot print. I'm gonna print this ID here. I'm just doing this to check the error. ID for edit. So it will show me whatever the ID will come in. So it's not exactly calling this method. Okay, it's done. So when it's come from the user view, I think we need to set one hidden field as it is there. As for my experience, let me check is there. Okay, perfect. Let me try it once. If it is work, then I will explain the code that I'm doing. Let's add it. I'm gonna add some O. Update. It has not still it has not inserted. And the file query is to as I can see the data in my output, it's showing it's returning the data like we print ID for edit. So it's printing the ID but it's showing the Java null pointer exception. So somewhere the data is not coming. So we are sending a wrong data. So let's restart our server and check it again if it is work now. So if I'm gonna this, I go to user list and go to Remo. So when I go add some O, if you notice this field is going to null. So let's enter some value here manually. So demo at the rate 123. We can hide this as well. And if you notice in the DOB, it's showing the data of password. So let's do one thing, make some changes in our code, and so let's add some date. Click on update. This time it's going to be update. So let's check the table. You can see some O is there, and if you want to let's check the list, some O means data is edited, but just difference with the formatting. So let's fix it now. So if I want a user view or user list view, sorry. So if I'm going to the user list view, we are okay in the user view. In the user view, we are setting first name first name, get first name, okay. Last name, get last name, okay. Login ID is a login ID, okay. Instead of password, let's add some password as well. So it's not going to create a problem there. Bean.get password, okay. And here also we are getting the password. Instead of password, we have to do the dob, get dob. Done. Now it will work perfectly. So there is an issue only with this with the parameters that we are going to pass from the front end. So go to user list, edit some records. If I want to change back to tail, update the record. It says not inserted. Let me check it again. Okay, I didn't remember that value there, so now log in again. Go to list, click on edit, and it's showing dob, okay. The password as well. Okay, so this data should be displayed in the format of this. So if I'm gonna so the dob date should be in this format. Now it will work. Now if you want to check the list, you can see that. So we have to fix the format for the date. So right now when we're going to edit it, it's showing the data in this format. We'll make this format like instead of dob, get dob. So if I check the data for date format for this, it will be its user controller. Let me check the specific format for the date. It's dob, and here get data string. So we have a method in the data utility which is get data string. So I'm gonna pass that method here. So it will be data utility dot get data string. I'm gonna pass it here. Right. Now it will show the data in that format only. So I refresh it, and you can see now data is in this format. Now we can update it. So I'm gonna enter a random data there and the last name, and click on update. It should update successfully. You can see the data is updated successfully. So in this way you can perform the edit operation. The next video will see delete, and we'll delete, and then we'll move to the project explanation, so that will be easy to understand you too how the project is working there. So it's like the last video is remaining. Thank you.